Hey there, this is your coach Paul Williams, and I'm out in my backyard. It's actually kind of windy out here, but it's a nice day. So anyway, I wanted to show you guys how to fill out a buyer representation agreement exclusive. So I've already logged into my Zip Forms account, and in here I'm going to go to my templates. Now, templates is one of those things that I think you need to set up pretty much right away. Otherwise, what you would do is you'd go into a transaction, and then you'd add a transaction, etc., and you can set it up. And I think I have another video, or if I don't, I'll show you how to do that exactly. But I'm going to start here on my templates. And it's going to load up, and you're going to see that I have all these different templates already in place. This makes life so much easier. Here's one we don't hardly ever use anymore, a short sale listing template. But today we're going to be covering the BRE, the Buyer Representation Agreement Exclusive. And we'll get that to open up. And you'll see that there's three parts to the BRE. I'm not going to worry about all of this stuff right now. We'll cover that at a different time. First thing is going to always be the disclosure regarding relationship agreement. You're going to do that anytime you're discussing anything with any client relative to real estate, whether it's a purchase agreement, a listing agreement, a buyer representation agreement. Buyer agency is the first thing you're going to have to discuss. If you don't know how to do that, get with me and we'll go through that. But right now we're focusing on the BRE. And here we go. So this is how to fill the thing out. Mr. and Mrs. Buyers, Keller Williams Realty. Here I'm going to put in today's date and how long I want to be representing them. Me, run it out as far as you can. Okay? You don't know what their motivations are. Maybe you do. Sometimes things work out, sometimes they don't. So I'm just going to pick a date here, November 21st. Okay. I just filled out one where it was good through the end of the year. Next step here is any purchase, lease, or other acquisition of any real estate property or manufactured home as described as. Now the location, you have to have some sort of a location in here. In other words, you can't leave that blank and then they go off to New Jersey and buy a property and you try to claim. Same thing, they can't go to San Francisco and then you try to fight them for a commission. You can't do that. So here what I've done is I've just said North San Diego County inland. A little bit vague, a little bit large, but pretty much somebody who's thinking about buying something in San Marcos or Poway or something like that probably isn't going to be going down to South Bay to buy something. If they were, you might just say San Diego County. That's up to you. Price range, again, they say that this has to be filled in. Make it very broad. They should have already met with your lender. You should know what they're qualified for. So if they're qualified up to $600,000, make sure that this reads something like $400,000 to $800,000. Make sure that they get anything that they're going to buy that you're going to be able to represent them on. Okay. Following specific properties only. Let's say, for example, that you're writing an offer for somebody and you don't have a BRE filled out. This is a great opportunity to introduce what the BRE is to them. So you might just put in right here where it says 2A, you might check that and just put in the property address. Okay. And just tell them, yeah, it's for this property. But then that can lead you into discussion further. Or only the properties identified on the attached list. That's pretty self-explanatory. Agency relationships, it talks about it. Okay, possible dual agency, your single agency only. That's only applies if your broker represents only sellers or does not list properties. In other words, we only list properties for sale and we only work with buyers. Neither of these apply. Okay, so there's a potential for dual agency. Real quick, dual agency means that it's obvious if you are representing both the buyer and the seller. That's a clear dual agency. You're representing both. Where it's not necessarily so clear is, let's say that you have the buyer and you bring them in on my listing. That is also dual agency because Keller Williams Realty, San Diego North Inland, is the broker of record, in this case, Kevin Hughley. So that is a dual agency situation, even though it doesn't appear necessarily to be. It is by law. Okay. other potential buyers, what this is just talked about is, hey, I might have some other buyers that are looking for the same parameters that you are, and so be it. The conversation that I have is, I'm not working with anybody actively at this moment that's looking at what you're looking for, and I limit the number of buyers that I work with at any given time because I can't serve properly 200 buyers out there. So I'm a little bit particular about who I'm representing. So the likelihood that I'm going to pick up another buyer that's going to be looking for you for exactly what you're looking for is very, very slim. Also, because you've signed this thing before they have, I'm probably going to give you first dibs at it. And I would disclose that to them if I was going to be working with them. I'd say, you know what, I'm working with Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, and they're looking for the same kind of thing, and I've been working with them for a while, so I'm going to work to get them into that house, probably sooner than you might be able to. So I would have that discussion. Non-confidentiality of offers. This is saying that, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, just be aware that once we submit an offer over to the listing agent, he can use that information basically however much he wants, unless we give them a written confidentiality agreement saying that he can't do it. But nobody does that. And what that means is, let's say that we submit an offer on a property and they get another offer. He can use our offer and tell us, the other buyer, what our offer is in an attempt to get them to increase their offer, and he can do the same to us. That's just fair game. It's called negotiation. It is what it is. Now, compensation to broker. Okay, down here. Let's see if I'm back in here. Oh, there's my mouse. Okay. Compensation, amount of compensation. This is 2.5%, put in 3%, whatever you think is fair and reasonable. I'm not going to discuss what's common because that's illegal. Put in 2.5%, put in 3%. If they balk at that, maybe you want to reduce it down to 2.5%. $395, that is what my transaction coordinator charges per transaction. I'm just going to tell them that that is an additional commission. The broker does not want us to say that that's a fee for the transaction coordinator. I would just say that's an extra commission that is really a pass-through. It doesn't go to me. It goes to make sure that the paperwork and everything is processed properly. But we have to just tell them that it's not a fee, it's a commission. Okay. We're also going to do, say, pursuant to the compensation schedule attached as an addendum. Now you'll see here that it only allows me to do one or two. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change this ADM 1. I've had the ADM 1, but I actually attached it to this just now and realized that it's doing this to me. So I'll show you that in a second. That comes from our previous broker, Connie Joy. Compensation, you can read through all of this stuff. If within 120 calendar days after the expiration of this representation period, what is this talking about? Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if at the end of this BRE, we haven't found you a property, and we decide to not move forward working together, and we don't sign a new BRE, and you go out and buy one of those properties that I showed you, then I can come back and have a discussion with you about my role in that transaction. In other words, you're going to be held to this agreement. Now, there's a caveat to that, and that caveat is I have to give you a list of all of the properties that we looked at, and it has to be on that list of properties. Okay? What this is there for is to protect me. If I've worked with you for 6, 8, 9 months, and we go out and we look at a property and you fall in love, and I know you would never do this, but there might be some people out there that say, well, you know what? Our BRE is expiring in 2 days, and we'll just wait till then and then go buy that property and get another agent or do whatever we want and not feel beholden. Well, that's not the way I do business. I'm sure it's not the way you do business, correct? And they'll say, yeah. So that's how you explain that out. Okay, timing of the compensation. This is, again, self-explanatory. You need to read this. Just as you get, I'm going to get compensated upon the close of escrow. Okay. This also states that if for some reason the buyer holds it up, if he's doing something that causes the escrow not to close, and basically he's doing it intentionally, especially if he's trying to dodge paying me, then he could be responsible for that commission. Very, very few brokers are ever going to allow you to go sue somebody for a commission under a buyer-broker agreement. It could happen, but boy, really hard. Item G, buyers not previously entered a representation agreement with another broker regarding property described in paragraph 1A, unless specified as follows. Pretty clear. They haven't already signed one of these BREs, and if they have for this property that they're looking for, they need to tell us here. If they fail to do that, they could be on the hook for 2 buyer representation agreements. They don't want to do that. And subsection 2 is the same thing. They have no obligation to pay any compensation to any other broker at all. If they say no, we don't have any agreements in place, we're good to go, well, you can rely on that. Okay. It talks about internet advertising, social media. You can read through all that. Broker authorizations and obligations. Learn this part because it becomes important in your presentation to the buyer. Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. Scope of broker duty. Buyer obligations. What are they obligated to do? If within 5 calendar days from the execution of this agreement, buyer shall provide relevant personal and financial information to broker. In other words, a pre-approval letter of some sort. Talk to the lender, get vetted, show that you can actively go out and purchase a property. We're also going to include the statewide buyer and seller advisory. We're going to tell the neighbor's dogs to shut up. And then we also have that Addendum One. Okay, the entire agreement. Maybe if I stop talking, they'll stop barking. Anyway, I don't know how annoying that is for you. I hope it's not too loud. Dispute resolution. Again, this is going to talk about, working it out, mediation, and if not, then we go to arbitration. That's a binding thing, and then they're going to sign it here. Okay. Buyer's inspection advisory. You should also be familiar with this. It's just telling them go out and do your due diligence, get your inspections done. Don't rely on what I tell you or what anybody else tells you. Your friend lived in the neighborhood. None of that. You need to go out and do your own investigation. Don't rely on us. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to show you Addendum 1. And what this says is, if I can scroll up, as your agent, I will accept the following consideration in connection with our buyer representation agreement. For properties offered for sale by owner or not otherwise listed, I will negotiate a commission with the seller to be paid out of seller funds at close of escrow. For properties offered for sale by developers or builders, you agree to permit me to accompany you on any visit to a new home sales office to register as your representative. 3, for any property acquired during the term of this agreement where you have acted in violation of our agency agreement, you agree to pay the commission otherwise offered through the MLS or an amount equivalent to 3% of the selling price for properties not listed on the MLS. So here's where I think what I would add is, I'm going to go ahead and go. Number 4, for properties in the MLS, buyer agrees to pay 3% plus $395 commission to Keller Williams Realty. And then that way I don't have to worry about checking both of those boxes, okay? And then I'm just going to hit save. Where is that here? Save. Okay, you see it saved, and then I'm going to go back. And pretty much now I'm done with the filling out form of this, okay? I'm going to just open this up real quick here because it has some important information in here also. Give me a second. Okay, this item right here. Okay, this whole paragraph. That's that doesn't want to work. Compensation payments and credits. Buyer is responsible for payment of compensation provided for in this agreement. However, if anyone other than buyer compensates broker for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited toward buyer's obligation to pay compensation. Huh? What? What does that mean? In other words, if I go and I represent them and they go buy the house in the MLS, and the MLS is offering 3% co-op to me, that's someone else paying my broker compensation, that 3%. And that will be credited towards the buyer's obligation. In other words, they wouldn't owe anything at that point. Let's say the MLS is only offering out 2.5%. That means the buyer would be on the hook to pay you 0.5%. They're 3% under the BRE minus the 2.5% broker co-broke under a co-op underneath the MLS. They owe you 0.5%. If the amount of compensation broker receives from anyone other than buyer exceeds buyer's obligation, the excess amount shall be disclosed to buyer, and if allowed by law, it is, paid to broker, or credited to buyer, or blank. Just leave that alone. You get it. So again, let's say that you filled this out and you said that they owe 2.5%, but the MLS offers a co-broke of 3%. You simply let the buyer know, by the way, they're paying me 3%. That gets the broker, or the buyer, excuse me, gets the buyer off paying any commission. The extra 0.5% gets paid to you. So now let's talk about real quick. Let me flip over to this. There we go. Let's talk about how do you present this to a buyer. Remember when I said learn that one part in the BRE that talks about your duties and obligations? What I've learned is that the best way to do this with a buyer is when I first sit down with them. Especially, it depends on what your relationship is. Do you want to build some rapport with them a little bit? Is always a good idea. Hey, it's great to sit down and finally meet you guys. You feeling excited? I'm feeling really excited about this. I've been in this for 26 years, and it never fails to excite me when I know that I'm going to find somebody the home of their dreams and a place that they're going to raise their families and grow their kids up, and that's really exciting for me. I hope you guys are feeling the same level of excitement that I get out of this. Are you? Great. That's fantastic. So now we talked a little bit about where you guys are looking to buy. Tell me a little bit more about that. When exactly do you envision, in a perfect world, you and all of your stuff moving into the new house? Tell me about that. Let them talk. You might want to ask them, why are you looking to move? Obviously, you should know, do they currently own a home? Do they need to sell that first? If not, if they're renting, they're month to month. But what you really want to do is you want to find the pain, because pain is the greatest motivator. And I'll give you an example of that. I mentioned that I just recently signed a BRE with a client, and she has a baby that's due in like 4 or 5 months. And at first they were like, we're not in a real hurry. We don't have to buy some. Everybody always says that. We're not in a really big hurry. And so I asked her, I said, well, what's your due date? And she said, well, it's September 1st. We'd already had a previous discussion about the baby and ultrasounds and all that stuff. So it wasn't like I was just jumping out of the gate. And I said, so September 1. So, most escrows typically run 30, sometimes 45 days. Would you agree? They'll say yes. Okay, so September 1, so August 1, so that would go to July 15th. So if we had an offer on a property that got accepted, if we got accepted on July 15th, that means that you would be moving in all your stuff on the day that, and I've looked at the wife, that she would be having a baby. And I kept looking at her and I said, how do you feel about that? And you could see her eyes go like this. You go, oh, well, no, I have to have something down. No, can't, no. Okay, all right. So that means that we have to be in escrow before July 15th. Would you agree? Oh, absolutely. So how long before you have the baby do you want to be able to get in there and paint the nursery and get everything set up, buy the new crib, do all those things, and really get settled in so that you guys are really ready to have a baby? You know, how long do you think that would take you to do? Oh, 30 days at least. Okay, so now we're to June 15th. That, you know, is almost a drop dead date. We've got to be in escrow on June 15th or sooner. Would you agree? And they go, yes. And then I said, well, let me ask you this. What happens if we get into escrow and for some reason we fall out of escrow? Let's say that we get into a physical inspection and there's things that are not acceptable to us and the seller is not willing to fix them. And we end up having to cancel that. And if we get into escrow on June 15th and we go through 15 days, 2-3 weeks of this exploratory period, and then we fall out of escrow and we're back to looking at houses again, we're basically starting all over, how would that make us feel at that point? And again, you see them, you know, realizing, oh my gosh, this could be disastrous. And that's exactly what I want them to understand. This could be a disaster. That's why I'm here, is to make sure we don't allow disaster to happen. So the best way for us to do that is to make sure that we're in escrow long before June 15th. Really, we need to be buying something now. Would you guys agree that we better not wait? Because how much stress would that be putting on you guys if we got to June 15th and we weren't in escrow on a house? How would that make you feel? They're like, let's get going. We gotta buy a house. Okay? So that's what you need to do. I mean, it may sound a little bit harsh, but you want to find out what their real motivators are. Yes, they would like to get into a house. That would be really nice and neat. They envision, you know, having the kid in the house and all that's wonderful. And by the way, for anybody that has ever been pregnant and thinks that they'll wait till they have the baby and then buy a house because it'll be easier, forget it. We've had 3 kids. The major work all starts from the day that the baby is born, and all the sleepless nights starts the day the baby is born. You're exhausted. You don't have time for anything. If you're buying a house and you're pregnant, you better get into a house quick. It's almost too late. Get into a house. Now, here's how I explain the buyer-broker agreement to buyers. I sit them down, and after we've had this conversation, I say, okay, so obviously we're here because we're going to decide, you know, if we're going to choose to work together or not. Just as a seller of a home chooses to hire a real estate agent, that's what basically we're doing, is we're going to come to an agreement that I'm going to work on your behalf, that I'm going to represent your best interests, that I'm going to negotiate for you and try to get you the best deal on the house. Is that what you would like me to do? And they'll say, well, yeah, that's what we want you to do. Well, let me ask you this. What is important to you in hiring a realtor? What's important to you that you want from me? And they'll think about it for a little bit, and you can help them, and you can say, would you say that honesty is something that's important? Yeah, okay, yeah. Would you say that a diligence, in other words, a good faith diligence of being honest and trustworthy? Yeah, well, we would say that. Yeah, absolutely. We want you to be truthful, and you want me to be truthful with you, even when it may hurt. I can be honest with you. And they'll say, yeah, we want you to be honest with us, Paul. Okay, great. Well, what else do you think is important? Well, we would want you to, negotiate, hard for us. Okay, fair enough. That's excellent. I appreciate that. Anything else? And they'll kind of think about it a little bit. And then you say, well, what about loyalty? Would loyalty be important to you? And they say, well, what do you mean? In other words, that I'm going to work hard for you and I'm going to be loyal to finding you that home of your dreams where you can raise your family. Would you want me to be loyal to you, or would you want me to just forget about you and move on to another buyer that I may like better or something like that? I would never do that, but that would be something you would want, isn't it? And they would say yes. And then I turn the script on them and I say, oh, fair enough. Well, let me ask you this. As your realtor, what can I expect from you? And they've never heard that question before. They've never thought of it. And they sit there and they look at each other and they go, and you go, could I expect that you'll be honest with me? And they go, well, yeah, honesty. Yeah, we'll be honest with you, Paul. So if you like something or you don't like something, you'll be honest with me and let me know that. Oh, yeah, absolutely. If something changes in your situation, you'll be honest with me and let me know that. Yeah, absolutely, Paul. We'll be honest with you. Fantastic. Okay. What about anything else that you can think of that you might well, gosh, Paul, maybe loyalty, that you would be loyal to me. That, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah, we'll be loyal to you, Paul. Absolutely great. Well, there's one other thing. And they go, what's that? I said, that you buy a house, and when you buy a house, you use me as your agent. Would you say that's fair? And they'll go, oh yeah, absolutely, Paul. Great. And that's when I pull out the BRE and I say, this spells out exactly everything that we detailed. And I go through it line by line, where it talks about my duties and obligations and their duties and obligations. And they just sign it because you've literally walked them through the entire thing and they're sold at that point. Now, you will probably get a little bit of the questions of, oh, well, what does this mean we're paying you 2.5? Then you explain it. Yeah, what that means is if we go and we find a for sale by owner, you're going to allow me to go in and negotiate on your half. They'll go, oh, of course. And this allows me to do that when I go in there, because I tell them I have an agreement that you're going to pay me 2.5%. And these young kids, they don't have that. So it's really important that we build the commission in to the sales price, Mr. Seller. And they go, well, okay. They might raise the sales price. That might be part of the seller's negotiating ploy, but we're going to negotiate them down to fair market value anyway. We're basically just getting that for sale by owner to pay us the commission we're due. And then we also explain about if there's extra commission or not enough commission in the MLS. Now, by the way, sometimes agents will put in the MLS that they're only paying a co-brokerage fee of 1%. Or some X percent, and that's less than what I'm charging you. Do you feel that as your agent, I deserve to earn a fair wage? And they'll say, yes, you do, Paul. Great. Then what this does is it allows me to let you know that those homes exist also, and it gives you the opportunity to at least view those homes and make an informed decision if that's something you want to put an offer on. Is that fair to you? And they'll say, yeah, that sounds fair to us. Great. And then you just sign here, sign here, sign here. I'm excited to work for you. This is going to be great. Let's get started. That's it. So that's what I have to offer. So let me go ahead and end this here. And if you have any questions, by all means, better call Paul. See you soon.